Welcome to Sunny Brands, the podcast that highlights the companies that make the world a better place. I'm Eliezer Reese, founder of OutNotion, a branding agency and proud B Corp here in Portland, Oregon. And here are my co-hosts.
Hi, this is Rebecca, CEO and co-founder of the Impact Collective, also a certified B Corp in Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Sarah. I am the other co-founder of the Impact Collective.
Hey everybody, welcome to season 2 of the Sunny Brands podcast. This is going to be a very different kind of podcast. We had a lot of learnings from season 1, so I'm welcoming Sarah and Rebecca from Impact Collective. They're going to be joining me moving forward on the podcast. And today's episode, so the podcast is going to be, just to give you a little bit of a high-level view, we're going to be continuing with the idea of highlighting businesses that are running their businesses for good with a purpose. And there are various ways of doing that. One of the ways is B Corp. So we're going to be highlighting a lot of B Corps in this season, but we will also be highlighting other kinds of businesses that are also delivering on that promise. One of the episodes, the first one that you're about to hear today, is Dr. Bronner's. And last week, some news dropped about Dr. Bronner's and how it went down. And we just felt like it would be irresponsible for us to just drop an episode about Dr. Bronner's without giving a little bit of context for what happened last week. So I'm going to open the room and the floor for Sarah and Rebecca to give us a little bit of an insight for what went down and how it went down and what we think about it.
Thanks, Eliezer. Yeah, so we were super excited to release our first episode next week, and then some big news dropped, and so we wanted to provide a little bit of context. So last week, Dr. Bronner's announced, Dr. Bronner's is one of the highest scoring B Corps. They've been a B Corp for a long time, a big part of the movement, and they announced last week that they are choosing to decertify and sort of leave the movement behind. Not only that, but they wrote a pretty scathing PR release that we'll link about the reasons why they chose to do that. The release is titled, Highest Scoring B Corp, Dr. Bronner's announces plan to drop certification, citing weak standards that enable greenwashing and purpose washing by multinationals. In this press release, they outline a couple of really specific grievances about the standards that are required to become a B Corp. And that they have been trying to work with B-Lab for a few years about creating more rigorous standards, and they're disappointed by the response and reaction. And one of the big things that they're really kind of objecting to is large multinationals, Nespresso, which is another episode this season, and the fact that B-Lab does not require these large companies to certify their supply chains in order to be a B Corp. So it's pretty huge news. And Rebecca and I have both been seeing like a lot of ripples in the community. So we wanted to just address both the elephant in the room of the decertification and a couple of things that we've seen and noticed in the dialogue since then.
Yeah. So when I first heard the news, I wasn't totally surprised. I mean, I knew it was a big deal and I knew it would have these ripple effects. But because we just did all this research on them and did this episode a few weeks ago, recorded it, I knew like that Dr. Bronner's, they're just way ahead of the movement, the B Corp movement specifically. They have always been way ahead of the movement. They've always pushed the movement to come meet them, right? And this is just one other example of that. So it was kind of, to me, I was like, this is kind of how Dr. Bronner's operates. Like it makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I was like, good for them. They're trying to make change. And this is almost like a protest kind of them leaving. And they're trying to get attention for it. And they are. So like, kudos to them. They're getting this conversation started. It also made me realize, or like something I've realized for a long time, but I think a huge piece of this is B Corp specifically tries to be kind of a one size fits all for a lot of different types of businesses. There is quite a big spectrum from nonprofit to traditional for-profit that's just there to make money and nothing else, the Wells Fargo's of the world, right? But there's a really wide range in between there. And all the way from over on the for-profit side, you might have a business that has a corporate social responsibility program. Walmart, frankly, has actually a really big CSR program, so they could be considered over on that side. Then you have socially responsible businesses, which might be Nespresso, which is B Corp. I'm pretty sure they got the lowest score possible, but they're a huge company and they're doing the bare minimum, I would say, in terms of socially responsible business. And then you have all the way over here, social enterprise. Well, actually, B Corp is probably right in the middle, right? Like most B Corps are right in the middle. And then you have social enterprises, which are companies or organizations, they could also be nonprofits actually, that are formed whose whole purpose is to solve a social or environmental problem. So that's a big range. Dr. Bronner's is over here towards the nonprofit side, and Nespresso is over here towards the traditional for-profit side. Those mean really different things, right? And there's one certification that says they're kind of in the same bucket. So of course there's going to be tension, right? And I don't know what it's going to mean for the movement. What I would love to see is, I don't want to kick any of those out, right? I don't want to kick them out of the business for good movement. They just need to be recognized in a different way. So the good that Nespresso is doing, which is legit, they're doing some real good in their company, and the good that Dr. Bronner's is doing is way different. Both should be celebrated, but in different ways, right? So that's something that I would say the movement is grappling with at the moment. Yeah.
And I think that this is actually universally karmically like a really great setup for this whole season, because that's a lot of what we talk about in all of these episodes is like, it means different things to be an impact-driven or purpose-driven business to different businesses. Some people choose to pursue a certification or verification, for multiple reasons as a framework or as a, marker of it. And some businesses choose not to, and just to have the impact that they're having. Some businesses choose to release impact reports or not. There are, I think a lot of what we're trying to do with this second season is just what Rebecca was talking about, is kind of talk about like the breadth and like expanse of what it means to be an impact driven business. And I hope that a lot of like again, like I don't know what the ripple effects are going to be of this decision. I think that, part of the Impact Collective, what we do is help people get B Corp certified and recertified. And so is this going to impact our business? I don't know. But I do know that like the approach we take to B Corp certification is always as a framework for increasing your impact rather than as like a marketing tool or, anything like that. And I think that what we've both seen in the dialogue in the community has been really, while I've seen things that are sort of in the middle, I've also seen really polarizing, like kind of cringe takes, sort of on both sides. There's a celebration of the downfall of B Corp, and there's also like a sort of like a villainization, of Dr. Bronner's. And I think that some people are sort of reacting out of fear, reacting out of a scarcity mindset. But I think that like my biggest takeaway is that if the most passionate people who are a part of the B Corp movement are not able to like acknowledge and recognize ways that it could be improved or might be missing the mark, that's hugely problematic and concerns me.
Yeah, that part has been the most heartbreaking to me, is that it's such a clear disconnect of folks whose values and beliefs, they're acting in a way that's different from their values and beliefs. Like they talk about this movement being inclusive, but they're using this exclusionary language. So that has been just the part that's kind of bummed me out since the news has come out. And if only it were easier to have more gray area in the business world. If only. That's my dream.
If only systems change and movement building was easy and simple. But I do think, what I'll say before we let everybody dive into the episode is that so much of what we talk about in this episode is, as Rebecca mentioned, like Dr. Bronner sort of being ahead of the curve in terms of B Lab. One of the things I talk about is executive compensation, and Dr. Bronner's having a 5x cap on their executive compensation versus the lowest paid employee. That was way before B Corp, and that's a standard in the B Impact assessment. I'm not saying B Lab chose it because of Dr. Bronner's, but in my most optimistic moments, I hope that this will cause like positive change and like solidifying of the movement. So we hope you all feel inspired by the Dr. Bronner's episode and all of the good that they're doing to bring more positivity and soap to the world.
Good that they're doing regardless of a certification. That's the thing. They're still making an impact and they're still doing a lot of good regardless of whether or not they have that. So anyways, yes, I hope you're inspired just like we were.
And if anybody wants to chat deeper about Dr. Bronner's and B Corp and their decertification, hit us up. We got a lot to say.
All right, Joe, enjoy the episode.
Today, we're going to be talking about Dr. Bronner's. Dr. Bronner's is a personal care product company, probably most notable and recognizable for its packaging.
That packaging.
That packaging. We all probably have that packaging in some form or another in a bathroom, under our kitchen sinks, and various other places around the house.
I do not understand people who put their stuff underneath the kitchen sink.
This came from my shower. So
This is a shower, so I don't know why.
Well, I'll tell you why, Elise.
Okay.
So Dr. Bronner's makes a bunch of different stuff. They make lip balm, soap, body lotion, toothpaste, laundry detergent. Apparently now they do chocolate as well. But their pure Castile soap, which we have on the table there, is purported to be 18 in 1. So you can use it to scrub your toilets. You can use it to wash your hair, brush your teeth. I saw on their website in their customer reviews, somebody uses it to sharpen their gardening tools.
Whoa.
And apparently like the lubricant of it is better than, I don't know, whatever they sell. So
Yeah.
I haven't tried that.
no. I can't recommend some of those things.
okay.
And maybe later we'll talk about some of the more controversial uses that Dr. Bronner's in the early days said
boy.
you could use it for.
Oh, boy.
They have retracted most of those statements at this point. So Dr. Bronner's, their sort of mission statement is, in all we do, let us be generous, fair, and loving to spaceship Earth and all its inhabitants, for we're all one or none. So it may not surprise you that they are a B Corp. So Dr. Bronner's was founded in the 40s. They've got a long and very interesting history that we might get into some of today. But they've been a B Corp since 2016. They have a B Corp score of 205.6, which is a lot.
Yeah.
For context, what's the minimum score and what's the maximum score?
The minimum score is 80. So you have to have a minimum of 80 to get certified. B Lab says that average businesses score 50 points, which I don't know what an average business is, but maybe non-purpose driven.
Yeah.
And the
Widget
maximum,
store.
the maximum is like 250 plus. And for context, I think Patagonia, which everybody uses as kind of the gold standard, has like 160 something. So 205.6 is a lot of points. So today we're going to get into all the details of what make up those 205.6 points and kind of see if their outsides match their insides. So excited to discuss.
Yeah. I love Dr. Bronner's. My favorite thing is how tingly the soap is.
This is yours,
Yeah.
and it's almost empty.
Yeah, I use it a lot. Yeah.
I can tell.
It makes you feel like it's working, but you know.
The peppermint in it.
I have dermatitis. That probably would not go well for me.
Yeah. Well. Anyways, so excited to talk about Dr. Bronner's impact, which they talk about on their packaging. You know, they're all about impact. 205.6 score means that they're doing it all. So I'm excited to dive in. The first thing I looked at for them was their impact report, and there's kind of like a sniff test that I use for impact reports when looking at them, and Dr. Bronner's passed it for sure. And just immediately looking at it, it's like you can see that not only is it a good story, a story that's aligned with their mission, everything is aligned with Dr. Bronner's mission, which is all about community, but they also have the numbers to back it up. So, and it was really well thought out and well laid out and just clear, really clear. They're just so clear about the impact they make. So I'll tell you about that impact. Actually, the first thing that stood out to me that I love, the very first sentence on their impact report was about impact washing. So they say These days, more and more companies say they are mission-driven. Massive multinational corporations make this claim now too, even though they're still structured to extract profit at all costs. We know saying we are mission-driven isn't enough. It depends on what that mission is. So
I wonder who that multinational they might be referencing is.
yeah, I have an idea, but
I have an inkling.
But what they're getting at is like impact washing, which is becoming a bigger deal because a lot of companies are just saying that they're good for the environment, good for people, all these things. They say that we're all about their mission, but their mission is just like grow.
Right.
It's like if your mission is just to grow, like
For what?
so what? Like we don't, like that's not really making an impact. So
Right.
I love that they say this like the very first thing, and like I said, they have the data and the numbers to back it up. So they're all about. I said that they're all about community. They actually, within their B Corp assessment, got 83 points just in the community section, which is one of the 5 sections. That's the highest I've ever seen. You need 80 to get certified in general. So to have 80 in one section
That's
is
wild.
huge. It's like really big deal.
So that's almost half of their points total.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
our community.
Exactly, yeah. So very cool to see. They talk about everything they do is guided by their core values, and they have these 6 cosmic principles. I've never seen values listed this way where their values are just each of their stakeholders. So B Corp is all about growing the stakeholder economy, meaning that when you make a decision as a business, you take all of your stakeholders into account, which is anyone that's impacted by your business decisions, which could be your customers, your suppliers, your workers, the planet. Those are your stakeholders. And it's really cool that Dr. Bronner's lists these as their like cosmic principles, they call them. So they list ourselves, their customers, their employees, their suppliers, the earth, and their community. So every decision they make, they take all of those into account.
And for context, you have from the 5 places that you can get points as a B Corp, communities 1, what are the others?
Yeah, good question. Workers is another one. Community is another one. Governance and environment.
Got it.
Yeah. So they have a lot of points in all of them, which is cool, but especially community is clearly their focus.
They actually, don't they only have 4 points in customers?
Oh, I didn't. Yeah. You're right.
Which
I know.
is super interesting. Like they have focused so much of their energy and effort on sort of internal like community environment stuff. And I'd say as customers, we're still pretty happy, but they've focused all of their efforts internally.
Yeah. That surprises me too, because like their product is like doing good, you know, cleanliness. It seems like a good thing. So it's interesting they like don't have a lot of points in that. Yeah. Huh. It might be because I think a lot of those points are around do you have like product quality guarantees and warranty? I guess
Right.
you don't really have that on like consumer goods so much, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting.
Yeah.
The part that I thought like that blew me away that I've never seen in another impact report. The very first thing they list after talking about their mission and stuff is financial stewardship. And this is to me what it's all about is like, where is the money going? That's the best in terms of governance and like your business model. That's what it's all about, is not having extractive models for business. And they talk about that is they're like, here's where our money goes. This is why we're not an extractive model of business. And the really cool thing, like I'll just list, they have 200 million in revenue and they say this much goes to raw materials, 38%, goods and services, 23%, wages is 24%, donations is 2.8%, which donations and sponsorships, which is actually really, really high. Like our business is 1% for the planet, and that's hard to do, just 1%. So that's great. Taxes is 4%, which is actually pretty low. That's another conversation. Corporations never pay taxes, whatever. Depreciation is 1%. Interest is 1%. Succession financing, 0.4%. This, I thought, was the last piece is reinvestment in their company is 5%, which is this is what it's all about in terms of not having an extractive model of business, is that your profits aren't going to shareholders. They're not going to investors.
Gotcha.
For them, they're going back into their company, back into their mission. And that is like the gold standard for a sustainable model for a business, for an impact driven business. So cool that they put that like very first page, and they're clearly saying this is like the most important piece of this, you know?
Well, and that's not like a requirement to be a B Corp. Like they're choosing to do that and be super transparent, regardless of the fact that they're not being required to do that, which is, you know, another indication of their values and where they put their time and energy.
Totally. I think they're actually an example of a company that's pushing B Corp to be better and B Lab to be better. They're like leading the way, and then therefore B Lab follows and B Corps follow.
It's interesting because when I hear about B Corps, I mainly hear about Patagonia, but I don't hear a lot about Dr. Bronner in the B Corp conversation.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. Maybe we'll talk about it later. We have some guesses, maybe. Yeah. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about their mission as community and how they, like, every single thing they list out that they do to impact their community or to impact anything is rooted in community. They trained 16,000 smallholder farmers. They spent, and this is the cool thing, every single time they're like, this is how much we spent on that. So it's not like, it's clearly not fluff, you know. They're like, we actually put money where our mouth is, you know. So they spent $240,000 on farmer training, 1.43 million spent on social community projects like farmer support, health, education, water and sanitation. This was really cool. They're clearly they know a lot, have a really transparent supply chain, and they're really care about their suppliers. I was reading that they deployed medical camps in rural India where their mint oil supplier is based, because the community there is a long distance from well-equipped health facilities. So they actually brought that to them, which is, just heartwarming, but also like, that's a really good business decision, which is like, you know, obviously that helps their business and it's good for the people. It's just, that's like a perfect example of an impact-driven program that is like integrated into their business strategy too. They sourced 19 million in fair trade materials. This is the last thing I'll point out, which has to do with the environmental piece. My one I'm not so sure about Dr. Bronner's in terms of environment is like, it's liquid soap in a plastic bottle, you know, like it's not clearly not good for a lot of that is not good for the environment. But what was cool is they talk about that. They're like, we know this is bad for the environment. And they talked about this new program they started where they listen to customer feedback, which is all about that community piece. Customers were complaining about the plastic bottle. So they piloted a program where they started offering soap refill cartons that are mostly made of paper, which they piloted in 2023 at select retailers. So hopefully that succeeds and they keep growing that. But I just thought that was a cool example of like they were listening because they're so focused on community. They're actually listening to the community and responding to what they want. So Dr. Bronner's 10 out of 10. Yeah. I have no bad things to say.
You love the annual report. What are some like the pitfalls typically that you typically find when you're looking at annual reports that they didn't do that?
Yeah. In other impact reports, a lot of times it's all about the story, the pictures, the feel good, which is great. I think you need that, of course, but they don't have the numbers and the data to back it up. This was a perfect combination of those two. It's like qualitative and quantitative data. You know, a lot of times, because an impact report, rightfully so, is seen as a marketing tool, like it should be. But I think a lot of companies lean so far into the only marketing piece that they don't put the time and effort to put.
I think for context too, like I think as speakers we're required to file some sort of put something publicly of our report of how we accomplish what we accomplish. So
exactly,
we're required to do that. Every B Corp is required to do that.
Yes.
So I think that contributes to the kind of like, okay, we have to do this. So it's just going to be dry. You know, it's not going to have any brand storytelling that goes along with that.
Or really selective choices about numbers, right? Because you can also have numbers that don't point to impact, right? Like, like the number of employee resource groups you have, or the number of times, that you did X, Y, Z, right? And it's like, well, I don't really care how many employee resource groups you have, like, how many people attend them? Why did you start them? What kind of feedback have you gotten? Right.
Yeah.
So
are they staying in them? Are they enjoying
Do they come once and never come back again?
Exactly.
That might tell you something.
And I think the worst thing I've seen or the thing that I dislike the most in impact reports is when companies are like, we offered this many new products and we grew our sales this much. It's like, is this where that belongs?
It's a different kind of report.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm gonna argue with myself, I guess. Like, if you are an impact-driven company and your sales or your product or service is solving a social and environmental problem, then that is good for impact. So it's all about it. There's shades of gray, obviously, but there's certain companies I've seen that just sell widgets and they're like, we sold more widgets, like that's great impact. Cool. Like, not really. So
yeah. And I think what makes Dr. Bronner's like so brilliant is, and this reason why you probably feel so like they did a great job, is because they've done brand storytelling from day one. So I'll talk a little bit about the history. So Dr. Bronner's, which is not a doctor, he's not a doctor. What goes with his personality. He's not a doctor.
Of any kind.
He does know, he's a scientist. He does know like how to make soap. So that's what he went to school for. But he lost his parents in the Holocaust. And that's what a lot of people say that influences all-in-one or his moral ABC, which you can find in the bottle. It's 5-point font, which
get a magnifying glass.
Not very accessible.
Not very accessible. 6.5 is typically what you want for like a business card. 7.5 is what you want for a business card. So it's smaller than that. But he had this desire to tell, he experienced so much evil in the world. A lot of the stuff that you find in here was influenced by his Judaism, religion, and Christianity. So there's a mixture of those views in here. So take it as you will. But his whole passion about, he got in trouble for a bunch of different things, for preaching this stuff, for talking about this stuff, for seminars. Like, he was very passionate about what's in this bottle. You can almost say that he used the product as a way to tell the story. The product was a means to tell that story. And that's why, that's the part that is so, I think that you find in that impact report is that same thread of talking about impact from a story-driven perspective in a way that matches with the brand story as well. So I think I consider, I started that notion because George Floyd was a big inspiration for me. And that's what allows us to be more genuine about why we do what we do. I'm like emotionally connected to that, you know. And I think he was emotionally connected to the fact that I lost my parents out of the hatred and evil that exists in this world, and because of that, I want to tell everybody and speak against it. Yeah. And it's wild to me how a product can be a vehicle for something like that. Yeah. You know. And so it's just fascinating. I think one of the notes that I'm learning from this is just when it comes to telling your impact story, always threading it through kind of why you exist. Yeah. And I think that's what we get from the annual report. It just feels like very authentic in that sense. But I also think the next thing that's crazy to me as a graphic designer is this bottle stands out on the shelf. There's no bottles other like it. My wife just brought a dish soap that you can tell they copied this label. I'm not going to name names. But they almost called it the same name without using doctor. They did something else. I'm like, yo, you can tell it's a ripoff. Yeah. But that's when you know you did something really well. They've been around since 1940. They were hip before hip existed.
Before hip was a thing.
Yeah. 1960s, they hit their demo, which was like hippies in San Francisco. Like all the ideas that are on the label,
Yeah.
what the ingredients are in the label are things that in the 60s hippies really care about. Now hippies beat us to creating really well, like authentic and like good for the body product.
Yeah.
So they really bloomed there. And in 2000, during the pandemic, their sales really skyrocketed because we were all encouraged to wash our hands. So this is the brand that people went to. So they've been authentic since day one. They told their story. Their label, when you go to buy soap, they stand out. Design played a part in differentiation. So that's a big note on how design can be leveraged as a way to not just tell your story, but stand out among the crowd. Actually, the story with the design, with the impact, with all, that's what makes like you just wrap it with a bow and just go home. Like it's
I'm gonna
just
give this
done
for all my Christmas
beautifully.
presents.
Yeah, and it looks beautiful. And the font, like to tell you the truth, like it's pretty basic. There's nothing like crazy about it. Like the font selection is not. It's just all very basic. But typesetting is really good.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
and it's
what's
just
interesting to me is like it looks old school. Like it looks
Yes. Yeah.
they've had this forever.
Yep.
But it talks about psychedelics on there. It's like cutting edge in terms of the content that's on there if you read it. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition to me.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I learned from Dr. Bronner's, you should definitely go like read on him. Like he was a character. But is our tagline, Don't Chinese Embrace Your Difference. And he's like the perfect example of that. You know, he just embraced his views. People hated him. Some people hated him. He just was who he was, and he didn't care to like do what he was called to do or what he felt like he was on this earth to do. And so I think that's one thing that as brands launch, one of the things I see all the time, you know, right now Jaguar is like a big conversation. What I see all the time is businesses are so terrified of launching and taking the risk of being themselves that they end up being the same. And blending in actually is what destroys you. Standing out is actually the safe bet.
Yeah.
I mean, with Jaguar, people are like, yo, like everybody's talking about it. Like, I'm a brand person, so like it makes sense for my industry to be talking about it. But I'm seeing people that are not designers talking about how, and it's like the use of color, how they use color in cars. Like, who saw a pink car before as the main leading color for the car? You see it as like people painted it pink, but no, they made it pink.
Yeah.
You know, their commercial, like everything, the way they rolled the entire thing was provocative. And if you're doing branding these days and you're not provoking, you're wasting your time. If you want eyeballs, and you can question, are we doing it all for eyeballs? If you're doing marketing, kind of.
That's kind of the point.
You know? So, but the opportunity that we all have to do that in an authentic way, especially in the B Corp movement and outside, just not being a B Corp and just wanting to make an impact, using your story as a way to stand out, but also your aesthetic and the way you present yourself, like all those things. We tell our clients, we always split our stylescapes, which are just long visual treatments for understanding how the brand is going to translate into everything. We call them mild, medium, and spicy. And we tell them spicy is the one that we are using to intentionally push you. Mild is safe. If spicy,
Everybody chooses spicy?
no. Not everybody would choose. Most people are in the medium mild category.
Yeah.
And I'm like, spicy is supposed to make you afraid. You should feel nervous looking at this.
Yeah.
I'm sure when people were the creative directors of the Jaguar campaign were a little like,
Very nervous.
this could go south,
Yeah.
you know? But that is actually what you want when you're making a pivot that hard. And I
Yeah.
think Dr. Bronner from day one has done that, you know, and told the story.
That reminds me of a lot of our clients that we work with, like being really specific about who you are and like what you believe in, also allows people to opt out, right? Like people can just more easily opt in and opt out. And like, I want people to opt out. If you don't like what we talk about, like, I don't want to waste my time, you know, like that actually makes it all easier, right?
Yeah.
You know?
And they found their audience in 1960, and now we all just kind of piggyback on that.
Yeah.
And the continuity of like understanding who you are from the beginning and making choices all based on that vision actually makes business a lot easier, right? Because then you're not faced with like dozens of choices and how do we decide? It's like, well, how do we decide? We know what our intended impact is, what our vision for the world is, which one of these things is in line with that, you know? And that's a lot of actually, so what I want to talk about, Dr. Bronner's today, is actually about executive compensation. So this has been a big topic of conversation in the world recently, and for the last several years. So since 1978, CEO compensation is up 1,085%. The comparison is that typical worker compensation is only up 24%. So, you know, CEOs and typical workers, whatever that means, has always had this disparity, right? And that has continued to grow vaster and wider over the years. The federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour and has not been raised since 2009, which adjusted for inflation, the current federal minimum wage is actually 40% less than it was when it was in 1970. A federal minimum wage, full-time hours, you can't afford a one-bedroom apartment in any major city in America. So there's this huge pay disparity, and people are taking action because of that in a lot of different ways. So Dr. Bronner's has actually established a 5-to-1 pay ratio cap, which means that the highest paid employee will never make more than 5 times as much as the lowest paid employee. And so for comparison, Walmart has a 933-to-1 pay ratio variety, which is wild, like just wild.
What is that? Like, what's the numbers for that?
I don't know. It started getting depressing when I looked at it. I was like, well, I think the lowest, you know, there was like $21,000 a year. And so whatever, you're the numbers guy, whatever 933 times that is, right? Millions and millions and millions of dollars.
1.8 million or something.
That means I want to go work at Dr. Bronner's.
More than that.
Say Walmart.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to go work at Walmart. Totally.
Or you
Because I'm going to get paid real nice.
Unless
Really
you're
nice.
at the top at Walmart, then you're going to get paid really nice.
Just climb the Walmart ladder and you'll be fine.
And you'll sleep fine.
Yeah,
Everything will be fine.
Everything will be great.
Yeah.
So the thing is that, and I'll talk about a little bit about this in terms of B Corp certification, but they set this, so they became a B Corp in 2016. They set this 5-to-1 pay ratio cap in 1999.
Wow.
That's
So
crazy.
this is
See,
like,
that's what I was saying
Ahead of the
about
ball.
like they're ahead.
Yes.
I bet you B Lab copied them.
1,000%.
Yeah,
I was thinking that. I was like, I think maybe they realize that that's, you know.
Yeah.
So they've had this pay ratio cap for a long time. One of the things that I think about, so they talk a lot about, one of the quotes is they treat employees as we would treat our brothers and sisters, create a healthy environment and programs that encourage personal well-being and growth, promote from within whenever possible, give employees every opportunity to thrive and take pride in their contributions to the broader world community through their work at Dr. Bronner's. So this kind of reminds me of the Impact Collective's mission statement, which is to empower whole humans and whole organizations to actualize their vision of a better world, right? Their mission statement and what they're talking about here is not their employees as conduits for Dr. Bronner's success, but vice versa, right? Through their work at Dr. Bronner's, they're able to live these rich, lives that then they get to contribute to the broader world community. So it's super in line with all of the other things we've been talking about. Their mission statement sort of staying in line with that. So some of the other benefits that they provide, they have a no deductible PPO health insurance plan, which means that they pay 100% of their complete healthcare premiums. There are no out-of-pocket costs for employees for health insurance.
Yeah.
half of the cost of approved childcare up to $7,500. They do infertility assistance, continuing education assistance, pet insurance, on-site massages, $1,000 rebate for purchase of an electric vehicle.
I want all that.
Well, I know. And during the pandemic, they offered $1,000 incentive to vaccinated employees, which was like one of their quote unquote controversies, which I was like, okay.
Good business decision.
Totally.
In my
Well, that's
opinion.
the thing is that like these are all one of the things they talk about in their impact report around employees is we're a family, which I feel like sometimes not a good thing, right? It's like in that case, it's like used to like gaslight and emotionally manipulate employees into doing unpaid labor. But the thing about Dr. Bronner's here is that they are matching the we're a family with the pay and the benefits to back it up, right? There's on-site massages and pet insurance and 0% out of pocket for health insurance and pay that is, capped at 5-to-1 for executives.
24% of their revenue goes to wages and benefits, which is huge.
Huge.
That's a lot
Yeah,
of money.
that's a lot.
Like they're walking the walk.
That's a lot, especially for a product company. Usually you see that with service-based, like professional services companies, but like
Totally.
it's impressive.
Well, and here's the thing. So
Which, for context, $200 million revenue.
yeah.
So
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Let's do
it's
the
about
math.
50 million.
50
like
million, yeah.
It's about
25%.
50 million.
How many employees do you know?
Well, so here's what I was going to say. I think the point is, the thing to come to is that these are all really great things and some of it feels good and, it's like pay to back it up and all of that. But it's like, okay, but what about like the business case? So there are real substantial business benefits for I hate that it's like I feel so like passionate about it. Like business benefits for treating your employees well. Okay.
Do we need a business case to treat people well?
And yet I have one.
But there is one. We need both.
Yes. So in 2022, according to the All One report, Dr. Bronner's had a 3.7% turnover rate. A 3.7% turnover rate.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Especially for that type of company.
Yes.
Like I said, that's
and
wild.
Average tenure is 6.5 years. So, the amount of money that is required to recruit, hire, train, offboard, onboard, is a substantial business cost that you're avoiding by onboarding an employee once who then stays for 6.5 years, right? So they were at $4 million in revenue in 1998. 1999, they put a pay cap on executive compensation. And since then, they have grown to nearly $170 million in 2022.
200 in 2023.
And I'm not saying it's because they capped executive compensation. But I'm not
hurt.
saying it's not because
It didn't hurt,
right?
you
It's
know.
all of those things that are in line with their mission. And the thing is, like sometimes when we talk about like benefits for employees and what that means for the company, I don't know. I get a little bit of a weird feeling about talking about like employees like in like a productivity measure. That being said, engaged and satisfied employees are more productive. They're less likely to leave their jobs. They contribute to higher customer satisfaction, and they generally perform better than disengaged employees. They're more likely to go above and beyond, to care about the company's success, and essentially like their positive attitude and commitment because of the way that the company treats them is this cyclical thing, this circular thing that then benefits the company. But so this is the last thing I'll say is that it goes beyond the business case, and Dr. Bronner's acknowledges that. There was a video and a quote from it from one of the executives. An ethical company should pay a fair salary and good benefits and enable people to make ends meet on the wages they receive. Everything in addition goes to charity and the causes we support. We're really trying to set an example of just being reasonable. We live great, awesome lives. We feel enriched by the super high, joyous vibes around us. For us to prosper, everyone needs to prosper.
Oh,
Like-
I'm gonna cry.
I know, I almost cried. It's like, well, and it's so interesting too, how them simply saying like, we're trying to set an example of just being reasonable.
Yeah.
They're still making a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's just not millions of dollars.
It's not extractive.
It's not extractive.
Yeah.
Does that practically mean that, and that the executive compensation, does that mean like there is no profit sharing for executives typically, or?
So they have profit sharing. So the thing about the 5-to-1 cap is that it's inclusive of bonuses and packages and all of
Okay,
that kind of
gotcha.
stuff. They do, and I didn't write the numbers down here, but there's, I think 10% of every employee's paycheck goes towards a profit sharing model.
Got it.
And all employees, regardless of tenure or status, all receive the same benefits. So there's like, it's this egalitarian sort of model of how wealth is distributed throughout the organization.
Because with a 5-to-1 cap, you can all move up together.
Totally.
It doesn't.
And if you want to pay an executive $500,000, that means that you then have to go backwards to the person who makes the least,
Totally.
and bring them up with you.
Exactly.
Well, and the thing
That's
is too,
wild.
is that like, if you think about it, and I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but it's like, okay, so top executives at Dr. Bronner's are maybe making $350,000 a year. First of all. Okay. That's plenty.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. And those executives could likely go to other places, if they have, the skills and the talent and everything required to work at a company like Dr. Bronner's. They could likely go work at, I don't know, whatever, Burt's Bees or Nike or Adidas or other companies in that sector who would pay them $750,000, inclusive of bonuses up to $1 million.
Yep.
It's like, and they choose not to, right? Like all of these things are sort of saturating throughout every level, and it's a benefit to the executives and to those employees who are capped.
Could we also
below.
say though that that's also a downside? Retaining executive.
I mean, one could, but they've got a 3.7% turnover rate.
Yeah, they clearly retain them. I wonder if their model is mostly to promote from within.
Yeah,
too.
it totally is.
Yeah.
They said that. They stated that they have a policy around internal promotions. And the thing is it's also about like retention and recruitment, right? Because at this point in time, this is not a new thing. They've had this for 25 years. So if you're being recruited to come work into Dr. Bronner's, and it's also thinking about like, okay, that $300,000 that I might make somewhere else, that delta there, what's replacing that, right?
At what cost?
Yeah, and at what cost? And the cost, right, is the culture that you exist in, the good you're doing for the world, the benefits that are being provided.
Probably work a lot more hours.
Yeah.
I would bet.
Somewhere else. Yeah. So I don't know. I was looking for a scorching moment in here.
I know.
And I think the only one I found is that apparently one of the 18-in-1 uses that they used to promote for Dr. Bronner's is as a contraceptive douche. Okay. Which Dr. Bronner's walked back real quick and they said, just kidding, don't do that.
When was that?
Oh, a long time ago, probably in the 60s, right? Yep. But it was that. So the biggest controversies were around that. Just like,
wait, their biggest controversies from the 60s?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. From a long time ago. And then it was a big controversy around the vaccine incentive, which
yes. Well, opt in or opt out. That's
totally. Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
It goes back to embracing your difference,
Yeah. So overall, 10 out of 10. Yeah. Like, okay. I'm a fan and I approve.
Yeah, me too. I'll keep buying it.
Yeah. I'll start buying more of it. Yeah.
Well, that's it, y'all. Thank you for joining us. You can get the episode show notes and transcript on our website, sunnybrandspodcast.com.
If you have ideas or suggestions about any companies you'd like for us to take a look at and dissect, you can drop us a line at hello@sunnybrandspodcast.com. And if you want to learn more about the Impact Collective and all of the things that we do to help companies live out their purpose, you can find more information at theimpactcollectivepdx.com.